A raging snowstorm traps a grieving father, a guarded mother, and 3 fragile children in a lonely farmhouse, where loss collide with fate to weave an unexpected, life-altering bond. Before we begin, if you believe in the quiet magic of kindness and healing with love, subscribe, and let's walk this path together. The snow came fast that evening, like a white tide swallowing the earth. It howled against the walls of the little house on the hill, rattling loose boards and clawing at the windows, until even the sound of Nathan's breathing felt too loud. He kept his arm around Jamie, holding the boy close on the couch as the fire sputtered and hissed. The wood was wet. He'd known it wouldn't last a night. The boy stirred beneath the blanket, his small fingers clutching Nathan's flannel shirt. Is the storm going to eat the house too? Jamie's voice was fragile, a thin thread in the hush. Nathan didn't answer right away. He was staring at the ceiling, where faint creaks traveled down the beams with every gust. He thought of the roof tiles he had in place last fall, the ones he kept meaning to fix but didn't. "No," he said finally, forcing calm into the word. "It's strong. Stronger than the storm." Outside, the world was gone, just a whirl of white and shadows. The power had cut out an hour ago. He hadn't bothered lighting candles. The fire was enough, and anyway, they didn't have many left. He ran a hand over Jamie's messy hair. The boy had the same cowlick as his mother. Nathan swallowed hard. He hated when his mind wandered there, hated how it felt like a betrayal to even think of her name in this moment. The house groaned. Snow piled against the north side, heavy enough that Nathan felt it through his boots as he crossed the floor. He set Jamie down, wrapping the boy tighter in the blanket. "Stay right here," he said. "I'm going to check something." Jamie nodded, eyes wide and glassy. Nathan grabbed his jacket, too thin for this weather, and went to the kitchen. The back door shuddered in its frame. When he opened it, a blast of cold slapped his face, so hard it made his eyes water. He stepped out, boots sinking deep, and looked up. The roof was bowing under a drift nearly 3 feet thick. He cursed under his breath. If it collapsed, they'd be finished. The thought sent him back inside, to Jamie's pale little face and the thin walls doing their best to keep out a winter that seemed to want to swallow them whole. They couldn't stay. He knelt by Jamie. "Buddy, we're going to take a little walk." Jamie blinked. "In the storm? We don't have a choice." Nathan's voice cracked. He tightened his grip on the boy's shoulder. "I'll carry you. I won't let go." The child didn't argue. He just nodded, like kids do when they know the grown-ups are too scared for questions. Nathan wrapped him in an old quilt, tucking the ends tight. He stuffed a few matches and a pocket knife into his coat, slung Jamie into his arms, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit like a wall. They stumbled forward, Nathan leaning into the wind as snowflakes stung his face. His boots crunched over ice-hidden stones, slipping more than once. He adjusted Jamie's weight every few steps, muttering little reassurances. "Almost there. We're okay." But he didn't know where there was. Lights were out everywhere. Even the town's radio tower, usually a faint red glow, was gone. He pressed on, mind tracing the map of neighbors. The Millers had left for Arizona. The Ridgeways were too far east. Then, through the white haze, he saw it, a faint glow. A house. Nathan's chest tightened. He didn't care whose it was. If there was heat and a roof, they'd beg for it. The house was older than his, a farmhouse with sagging eaves and light bleeding weakly through warped curtains. Nathan stomped up the steps, heart hammering. He raised his fist and knocked. 3 sharp raps. For a long moment, nothing. He tried again. Finally, the door creaked open a few inches. Warm light spilled onto the snow, and a woman's face appeared. Auburn hair pulled back in a loose braid, a cardigan buttoned high to her neck. Her eyes flicked to Jamie, who whimpered against Nathan's shoulder. "We need shelter," Nathan said hoarsely. "Just for the night. Please." The woman hesitated. 2 little girls peeked around her legs, identical, with light auburn pigtails and curious, frightened eyes. Nathan held her gaze. We won't trouble you. He's freezing. Something shifted in her expression. Come in. The warmth hit him like a wave as he stepped inside. The room smelled of wood smoke and bread. The fire crackled in a stone hearth, and an old quilt lay folded on a rocking chair. The girls darted back as Nathan set Jamie down near the fire. Thank you, he said, voice thick. The woman nodded, closing the door. I'm Clara. Nathan. Jamie shivered violently. Clara knelt by him, her fingers light but efficient as she tugged off his wet mittens. She glanced at Nathan. He needs dry clothes. I don't have any for a boy, but whatever you have. Nathan's hand shook as he stripped Jamie's soaked coat. One of the twins whispered something to the other. Clara gave him a look and they retreated wide-eyed into the shadows. I'll get something, Clara said softly. Minutes later, Jamie was wrapped in a sweater much too big for him and propped on a cushion by the fire. He watched the flames, eyes half closed, lips faintly blue. Clara handed Nathan a mug of warm water. It's all I can spare for now. Nathan took it, his throat tight. You didn't have to let us in. No, she kept her gaze on Jamie. But I couldn't leave you out there either. He nodded, staring into the fire. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not unfriendly. The only sounds of the wind screaming outside and the children's soft breathing. Nathan didn't know how long they sat there before Clara spoke again. The storm's not stopping tonight. I figured. He rubbed a hand over his face. We'll head out as soon as we can. You'll freeze. Nathan glanced at her. Her face was calm, almost too calm. She had the look of someone used to doing hard things alone. Maybe we should wait, she said finally, for the children. Nathan looked at Jamie, then at the twin girls peeking around the corner. His jaw tightened. Yeah, he said softly, for the children. The storm rattled the windows. Somewhere outside, a tree cracked and fell. But inside, for the first time in hours, it felt almost safe. Nathan pulled the quilt tighter around Jamie and let his eyes fall shut, the heat of the fire licking at his skin. Clara stayed by the hearth, watching the snow pile higher against the doorframe. For a moment, there was no sound but the crackle of burning wood and the wind's distant howl. And in that fragile stillness they waited. The fire burned low, but it was enough to fill the room with a gentle glow. Shadows danced across the wooden walls, curling like smoke around the figures gathered in the small farmhouse. Nathan sat stiffly in a straight-backed chair near the hearth, his shoulders hunched, hands clasped together. He wasn't used to other people's homes. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a reminder that he didn't belong here. Jamie had fallen asleep, curled on a worn rug by the fire, his small chest rising and falling beneath Clara's oversized sweater. The boy's cheeks had regained their color, and his lips no longer held that terrifying blue tint. Nathan exhaled a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding for hours. Clara moved quietly across the kitchen, ladling thin soup into chip bowls. She wore her cardigan buttoned high. Sleeves rolled to her elbows, her auburn braids swinging gently against her back as she worked. The two little girls sat at the table, hands folded in their laps, their pigtails identical. They watched Nathan with wide, unblinking eyes, as if unsure whether to be afraid or curious. I don't have much, Clara said softly, placing a bowl on the table in front of him. But it's warm. Nathan hesitated before standing to join her. You didn't have to do all this. She looked at him then, her expression unreadable in the firelight. It's nothing. We all do what we can. He nodded and took the bowl, the heat seeping into his chill fingers. They ate in silence, broken only by the occasional clink of a spoon against ceramic. When the wind screamed louder, rattling the glass in the windows, the twins flinched in unison. Clara rose and laid a reassuring hand on each of their shoulders. It's just a storm, she murmured. We're safe in here. Nathan watched her, the way her touch calmed him instantly, the way her voice seemed to steady the air itself. He didn't remember the last time Jamie had been soothed so easily. Not since. He shut the thought down before it could finish. Clara glanced over. He's sleeping soundly now. Nathan followed her gaze to Jamie, curled tighter in his borrowed sweater. He hasn't slept like that in a long time. His voice caught slightly, and he cleared his throat. Thank you. Clara lowered herself onto a chair opposite him. It's not easy. Any of it. No, Nathan stared into his soup, stirring it absently. I thought I could manage. Just me and him. I thought if I kept moving, kept fixing what needed fixing, you wouldn't have to feel it. His head jerked up. For a moment, he thought she might have been mocking him, but her face was soft, almost knowing. Yeah, he admitted. Something like that. Clara nodded faintly, her eyes on the flames. I know that trick. Later, after the children had been tucked into a makeshift bed by the fire, Clara pulled an old record player from a battered crate in the corner. She brushed dust from its cover and set a record spinning. A low, scratchy melody filled the air. Soft piano, warm and a little broken, like everything else in this house. Nathan watched in the chair, unsure if he should say something. Clara moved slowly, folding laundry into neat stacks on the table, her movements almost rhythmic with the music. You don't have to stay awake, she said without looking at him. I can't sleep, he admitted. She glanced over her shoulder, one brow raised. Because of the storm? Because everything. His voice was low. I keep thinking of all the things I didn't do, that I should have done. Clara nodded like she understood. That doesn't stop. You just get used to it. He rubbed a hand over his face, weary to the bone. Hours passed. The fire dimmed to embers, and still Nathan sat there, listening to the twin soft breaths and Jamie's faint snore. Clara returned from the kitchen with a mug in her hands. It's tea, she said, or the closest thing I can make. He accepted it, his fingers brushing hers. The contact startled them both. Sorry, Nathan murmured. It's fine. She sat down across from him again, cradling her own mug. They sat that way for a long while, the only sound the crackle of coals and the wind pressing against the house. Why are you alone? He asked suddenly. Clara's gaze flicked to him, surprised but not angry. Because I trusted the wrong person once. Nathan didn't press. He knew that kind of answer. He knew how heavy the details could be. My wife, his throat tightened. She died 3 years ago. I'm sorry. Jamie doesn't remember her much. I thought keeping busy would help him. Help me? His voice dropped. But I think I just made us both lonely. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, You did what you could. That's all any of us can do. The storm howled louder, but Nathan barely noticed it anymore. Clara stood and crossed the hearth, kneeling to poke at the embers until they flared. The wood's almost gone. We'll need more if we're to keep the fire through the night. I'll get it. Nathan offered immediately. You should rest. You carried your boy through a blizzard. I'll rest after. She didn't argue further. When Nathan stepped out into the cold, the wind had eased just enough for him to see the outline of a woodshed in the distance. He trudged through knee-deep snow, shoulders hunched against the bitter air. Each breath burned his lungs. He found the door frozen shut, but pried it open with his shoulder. Inside, the smell of pine and rot greeted him. He grabbed an armload of wood and staggered back to the house. Clara was waiting by the door, holding it open just enough for him to slip in. You didn't have to take so much, she said softly. I didn't want to come back twice. Still, she helped him stack the logs near the hearth. Nathan sank back into the chair, shaking snow from his hair. Clara crouched by the fire again, adding kindling until flames leapt up. You'll catch your death going out like that, she murmured. He gave a faint, tired smile. You sound like my mother. Clara chuckled once, quietly, when the fire was roaring again. She pulled the twins' quilt over their small forms and turned back to Nathan. Get some sleep, she said. He hesitated, then nodded. But as he stretched out on the couch, he saw her still by the fire, her profile lit in soft orange. She was staring into the flames, her hands wrapped tight around her mug, as if bracing against something no storm could touch. Nathan closed his eyes, but her quiet presence lingered, warm as a hearth. And for the first time in months, he didn't feel completely alone. The storm had not let up. 3 days had passed since Nathan and Jamie had stumbled across the threshold of Clara's farmhouse, and still the world beyond the frosted windows remained buried in a white silence. It was a kind of silence that pressed against the walls and into the bones, making even the smallest sounds, a spoon tapping against a bowl, a child's laugh, seem louder than they should. Nathan stood by the window now, one hand resting on the cold glass. Outside, the yard was unrecognizable, blanketed in drifts taller than Jamie. He could see where the snow had curled around the shed roof like icing. The branches of the bare oak bowed low and creaking beneath its weight. For a moment, he thought he saw movement beyond the tree line, a quick flash of color, but it was only wind stirring loose leaves caught in the snow. Behind him, Clara knelt on the rug near the fire, wrapping Sophie in an extra wool sweater she'd unearthed from a cedar chest. The girl was pale and drowsy, her eyes glassy as she leaned against her mother's shoulder. "You're warm, aren't you?" Clara murmured, pressing her lips to Sophie's forehead. "That's good. You just rest." Nathan turned. His stomach tightened as he saw the sheen of sweat on the child's temple. "She's burning up," he said softly. Clara nodded without looking at him. "It started this morning." She was shivering, then hot. "I've been giving her sips of water, but—" Her voice wavered. "I should have had more medicine in the house." Nathan moved closer. "What do you need?" "Anything. Fever powder. Something to bring it down. I had a bottle, but it's empty. I'll check the shed. Maybe there's something." Clara's gaze lifted to his, her eyes tight with worry. "It's not worth it. The shed is bare. I checked it the first day the storm hit." He crouched near Sophie, brushing his hand gently against her cheek. The heat startled him. She was like a coal in her mother's arms. "Then I'll try the barn, or the outbuilding near the fence." "The barn's half collapsed," Clara said, "and you'll freeze before you get there. I'll take my chances." She opened her mouth to protest, then shut it again. Nathan could see it in her face, the same stubbornness he felt in his chest. There wasn't another option. The cold bit into him the moment he stepped outside. He layered both his and Jamie's jackets over his flannel shirt and tied a scarf tight around his face, but still the air felt sharp as glass. The snow came nearly to his thighs in some places. Each step was a battle. He pressed forward, scanning the white blur for the shadow of the barn. His boots crunched over frozen ground, sinking deep, pulling him down as though the storm wanted him to stay. When he reached the barn, he had to shoulder the door hard before it groaned open. Inside, darkness and a sharp smell of rot greeted him. He rummaged through an old wooden cabinet, fingers stiff with cold. There, a rusted tin, the label nearly worn away. He pried it open and saw a few yellowed tablets wrapped in wax paper. "Please," he whispered to no one, "let them still be good." Back in the house, Clara was wiping Sophie's face with a damp cloth. Nathan knelt beside her, holding out the tin. "I found these in the barn." Clara's hands trembled slightly as she took it. She read the faded letters, lips moving silently, then nodded. These should help. She coaxed Sophie to swallow one of the tablets, then held her close, humming softly. The melody was slow and sad, something Nathan didn't recognize. It was the same tune he'd heard her sing to Jamie on their first night here. "She's strong," Clara whispered, brushing hair from Sophie's clammy face. "They all are." "So are you," Nathan said before he could stop himself. Clara looked at him, surprised. For a moment, their gazes held, and in that fragile stillness there was something unspoken, too heavy to name, too delicate to shatter. That night, the fire burned low again. Jamie and Lila had fallen asleep curled together under a quilt, their breaths slow and steady. Sophie slept too, her fever finally beginning to ease. Nathan sat at the table, rubbing a calloused thumb over the edge of his coffee mug. Clara joined him, moving quietly so as not to wake the children. She slid into the chair opposite, her cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. "I keep thinking about what comes next," Nathan said softly. "If the storm breaks, if the road's clear, we'll go back to our lives." Clara's voice was calm, but her fingers twisted in her lap. "Back to how it was before. Will we?" She glanced up. Nathan held her gaze. "You've been alone a long time, haven't you?" "Yes." Her hand stilled. "I thought it was safer that way." "It is," he agreed, "but it's not warmer." Clara smiled faintly, though her eyes were wet in the firelight. "No, it's not." For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the wind ease its grip on the house. Nathan wanted to reach for her hand, but didn't. Instead, he let the thought sit quietly between them, like the warmth of the fire, steady and waiting. Morning came softly. Pale sunlight filtered through the frosted window panes, washing the room in silver. For the first time in days, Nathan didn't hear the winds cry. Jamie woke first, blinking sleepily, then whispering, "Daddy, it stopped snowing." Nathan crossed the room and pulled the curtain back just enough to see the yard glittering in stillness. No fresh flakes fell from the sky. Behind him, Clara stirred. "Does it look safe?" "Safer than it's been," Nathan murmured. "But it'll take time for the roads to clear." "Then we wait a little longer," Clara said. Nathan nodded, though a part of him already felt the weight of leaving. He stepped outside alone to split some of the wood he'd brought in. The air was sharp but bearable, the snow sparkling in the early light. As he worked, his breath rose in clouds, and with each swing of the axe he felt the tension in his shoulders ease just slightly. Through the kitchen window, he caught a glimpse of Clara carrying Sophie in her arms, murmuring softly to her as she rocked her back and forth. And for the first time since the night Jamie's mother had been taken from them, Nathan felt something deep in his chest. Not quite hope, but the faint echo of it, like the first touch of warmth on cold skin. He didn't know what would happen when the world started moving again. But here for now, in this quiet space carved out of the storm, he wasn't sure he wanted to leave. The snow had begun to melt in patches, leaving behind dark hollows in the drifts where earth and stone peeked through. The world was no longer silent. Water dripped steadily from the eaves, a gentle rhythm that filled the space where the wind's roar had once lived. Nathan stood outside in the pale light of morning, breath curling in the cold air, his hands raw from splitting logs. His muscles ached in a way that felt good, solid, earned. The air was sharper today, not with the threat of the storm, but with the promise of movement, of what might come next. Behind him, the farmhouse door opened with a soft creak. Clara stepped out, clutching a quilt against her shoulders. She was barefoot, her toes sinking slightly into the wet snow at the threshold. Her auburn braid had loosened, strands catching the sun. Nathan glanced over and gave her a faint smile. "You should have boots on," he said. "I wanted to feel it," Clara murmured. "The ground, the air. It's been so long since it felt like the storm would ever end." He looked back toward the horizon, where distant hills curved under the weight of melting snow. "Feels like we're standing at the edge of something." "We are," Clara said softly. "We just don't know what it is yet." The twins' laughter broke the stillness. Lila and Sophie were rolling a lopsided snowball across the yard, their small hands pink with cold. Jamie trailed behind them, carrying sticks for arms and a crooked pine cone for a nose. He laughed too, a sound Nathan hadn't heard from him in so long that it caught him off guard, twisting something deep in his chest. "They're happy together," Clara said, following his gaze. Nathan's smile faded into a thoughtful quiet. I forgot what his laugh sounded like. "You didn't forget," Clara said gently. "You just hadn't heard it in a while." Later, Nathan helped her hang the damp quilts across a sagging clothesline strung between two bare trees. The sun was high enough now to warm the air slightly, though their breath still showed in little clouds. Clara's fingers brushed his as they worked. Neither of them pulled away. "I never planned on this," Nathan said quietly. On what? On sharing a roof with someone again. On this feeling. Clara's eyes softened. Me neither. Does it scare you? He asked. Yes, she admitted. Then, after a pause, but it feels different from the fear I've been carrying all these years. Softer, less heavy. Nathan nodded. Yeah, me too. The quilt billowed in a sudden breeze, brushing across his shoulder. He let his hand linger on the fabric as he looked at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Inside the house, the children sat at the wooden table, coloring on scraps of paper Clara had scavenged from a drawer. Jamie held up a wrinkled sheet covered in blocky letters. Daddy, can I read you my letter? Nathan crouched beside him. Of course, Bud. Jamie cleared his throat, his small voice careful. Dear Miss Clara, can we stay here forever? Love, Jamie. Clara's hand went still where she'd been kneading dough. Her lips parted slightly, and she looked down at the flour-dusted counter, as if the words had caught her off guard. Nathan gently ruffled Jamie's hair. That's a good letter. Will you give it to her? Jamie asked. Nathan hesitated. His fingers brushed the paper's edge. Then he smiled faintly. I think she heard it already. Clara turned to them, her eyes glassy but her mouth curved in a soft, wavering smile. As the sun slipped lower, golden light filled the kitchen. Nathan set the table, while Clara stirred the pot of soup over the fire. The children chattered, their voices blending into a music all their own. When they all sat down, Nathan watched Clara as she passed bread around the table. There was a calmness to her now, a quiet strength that seemed to seep into every corner of the house. He realized he didn't want to walk away from this place, from these people. He reached for his coffee, then paused. His wedding ring caught the light, the gold dulled with time. Slowly, deliberately, he slipped it off and set it on the table beside his bowl. Clara's eyes flicked to it, then to him. She didn't speak, but he thought he saw her shoulders ease just slightly. After the meal, the children curled up on the rug near the fire. Lila rested her head on Jamie's shoulder. Sophie clutched her doll with drowsy fingers. Nathan and Clara sat at the table, watching them. You asked me the other night if I thought it was easier to stay alone, she said softly. Yeah, I think it's safer. She took a slow breath, but not warmer. Nathan reached across the table. This time, his fingers closed gently over hers. Outside, the last light of day lingered on the snow. Inside, the house glowed with firelight and the soft rise and fall of sleeping breaths. For the first time in years, Nathan felt a stillness inside him, not the brittle quiet of grief, but the tender hush of a life beginning to heal. He didn't know what the world would demand of them tomorrow, but here, in this moment, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't have to face it alone. And somewhere deep in the house, Jamie's crumpled letter lay on the table, the words smudged but legible. Can we stay here forever? Clara read it once more before folding it gently and pressing it to her chest. I hope so, she whispered. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe or share your feedback in the comment section.